Thank you to you all. I'll try to keep this short and sweet because we are running behind schedule and we've received a lot of warnings to say be aware of the schedule. And Amélie has already said the essentials of what we need to deal with as counsels for whistleblowers. My topic is thief or whistleblower, and I read the title and I'm like, of course whistleblower. Who even asks the question? It is true there are issues that necessarily arise when somebody blows the whistle. And one of the issues is that it is part of the whistleblowing to collect, copy documents and to communicate them to the press, the media, the public. That is the definition of a whistleblower. Since a few years, and more, and this is an increasing phenomenon we've seen as councils because we're dealing with it and it's getting harder and harder, and the LuxLeaks case is a good example. There is now even a responsibility on the whistleblowers' shoulders to collect sufficient evidence. They need to demonstrate their credibility. They are welcomed with a bit of skepticism, and they really need to bring sufficient documents to show that they have a reasonable doubt and they can demonstrate it. This leads to potential criminal charges of theft, of revealing information covered by secrecy. There are other charges. We've had the example with Christian earlier of procedures for defamation or libel, which are systematic or nearly systematic. You have detaining stolen goods, which can also be in certain countries a different offense. You have, they will consider that you are laundering information as well. So all of these charges, there are quite a certain number for Antoine Deltour, which we represent in the LuxLeaks case. Now there are quite a certain number of charges, criminal charges that can be brought and that will contribute to ruin the life of the whistleblower on top of losing his job and house and whatever. There is a question which is more a question of good sense, common good sense, which is, does it make a difference how the whistleblower got the information, really? It's not the point of the whistleblowing. If you consider that a whistleblower would enter a computer system in a fraudulent way, for instance, does it make the whistleblowing less legitimate? Does it undermine the public interest? Not really. Maybe the answer would be different if you have, luckily I don't know of any case of that sort, but for instance, if there is some physical violence to obtain documents, maybe we should say, yes, we need to change a little bit the way we consider things. But in most cases, if not all cases, the information was not accessed with violence. Of course, it was accessed with some intrusion in a database system, whether voluntary or involuntary. In the case of PWYP and Luxembourg, this was debated and it's public in the first instance, and it's redebated in the appeal proceedings now. The access that Amélie and Antoine Deltour had to the documents was not due to their maneuver, but was due to a default in the PWYP system itself. That even the company said, yeah, we corrected the default now, and we're sure nobody can access them anymore. It's fantastic. So if you consider that the whistleblower is perhaps a wrongdoer in the sense that, yes, there is a copying and getting documents, and revealing them, does that make him or her mechanically an offender in a legal sense? As I said earlier, when prosecution will bring criminal charges against these individuals, as is the case also now for Raphaël Allais and Antoine Deltour and Edouard Perrin, the journalist, there are two elements, and I'll try to be very simple and quick on this. These are legal technical aspects, which is not very interesting, but just for you to get a broad picture. In a criminal charge, there are two aspects. You have a material element. Did I take the documents? Yes. Did I give them to a journalist? Yes. Did I develop them? Yes. That's material element. It's established and it's very hard to contest. And then you have the intention. And then that's where you look if the person had the intention to harm, if the whistleblower was acting in good faith, and then can good faith be a defense against those criminal charges that can be brought against him. There are two ways to defend this as a counsel. The first is you can cross your fingers and hope that prosecution will use of its discretionary power not to bring charges, or to request for a minimum sentencing. It's difficult. It's difficult because whistleblowing, by definition, will bring public scrutiny on the case. And because of this public scrutiny, prosecution, whose role is to bring prosecution to act, it's a very complicated choice as well for prosecutors to make this distinction. The law applies to everyone, so there's also a choice to be made there. Of course, that would be the best for lawyers. If you come to a hearing and the prosecutor at the hearing says, well, you know what, I've thought about it, I'll drop all the charges and everyone go home. That never happens. That never happens. I'll just make a little anecdote here. It did happen in a defamation case we had last week in France. A former employee of a technology company called Cosmos, who the International Federation for Human Rights has filed a complaint against them for having sold technologies to the Syrian and the Libyan governments at the time, and they're under investigations, and this former employee has talked to the press. So he's attacked for defamation, and at the hearing the prosecutor said, actually I consider it. He was acting in good faith, and I'm not going to pursue public action. So we were like, fine. So should we still say something? Or then, as lawyers, you're actually afraid that whatever you might say might actually ruin that. So try to keep it. So that was a good surprise. It does happen sometimes. Prosecutor can also require minimal punishment. It's not a satisfying solution. It's better than nothing. It's not totally satisfying because it's a question of principle and not a question of quantum. The second aspect, so you can play on the prosecution side, or you can request for whistleblowers protection. And whistleblowers protection should provide for full immunity against any action. So criminal charges, civil claims, allegations of contractual breach of confidentiality, etc. And there are several criteria for this immunity. The laws in every country are quite different. We are starting to see a sort of harmonization, especially, well, as far as we are concerned here, I think in this room, under the ECHR jurisprudence. But it's not only the ECHR, and each country has still its own legislation, and Luxembourg seeks to has a strong will to mark its difference still today. In the US, you have very strong legislation for federal public servants, for instance. If they witness misbehavior, they have an obligation to report, and they will be protected, and they will have an immunity. It's valid except for classified information. That exception is present in most countries, if not all countries. You have in the UK, you can act under UK law. I will not go into the detail of every legislative system here, but in the UK, by law, you can actually go straight to the press. In Sweden, you have a whole chapter of the law which is for identity protection for the whistleblower, to preserve also his private life, his family, his social life. In Ireland and Serbia in 2014, you have new laws that have passed, which are amongst the strongest and most exhaustive legislative systems, which provide for full immunity if regulatory authorities have been seized in the first place and have not reacted in a diligent way. And I think for one of the countries, the time is even like around 1 month. If after 4 weeks they haven't given any sign, you can go straight to the press and you will be protected. And in France, we have a new law that has been passed that we call La Loi Sapin 2, Sapin being our, it actually means Christmas tree, but it's in the name of our minister. There is a recourse now against this law, so we're still waiting to see what will be the definitive text. It's a law that at the firm we have pushed very strongly for it. It's a mitigated result, it's better than nothing, but we have now also a full system for protection for whistleblowers. There's a provision that says that if there is a grave and imminent danger, a whistleblower will benefit of his protection, even if he reports straight to the press. There is also a system to protect the identity of the whistleblower, and there is even the creation of a new offense, which is an offense to obstruct a whistleblower, which is even a step further. I think the same exists in Sweden as well. It might not be the only two countries, but this means that in our minds and on the legislative plan, we are moving forward. So I'm trying to finish this day on a note of hope for everyone. Still, the strongest incentive comes from the ECHR, which has given 6 very clear criteria and very pragmatic, which we're trying to getting the Luxembourg court to apply, despite the first instance judgment. And you will see it actually comes also from common good sense. It's not very legal. The 6 criteria are under the form of 6 questions. The first question is that they will look, was there another way to divulge the information than going to the press? And in the LuxLeaks case, for instance, I will focus on this because it's so actual. In the LuxLeaks case, we demonstrate that there was no efficient internal system. It was not possible, neither for Deltour nor to Raphael Allais, to go and see their superiors and to say, look, I've seen this and I think this is not correct, we should not do this. The best proof of this is that they even dealt with Raphael Allais, threatening him and forcing him to sign an agreement to buy his silence. And in spite of that, he still stepped out, knowing the risk he was running. The second question is, was the matter of public interest? So it's a very wide approach of the public interest. The third question is, was the information true or authentic? There's not, the court doesn't impose an obligation on whistleblowers to conduct verifications as specialists. This requirement would be harder for journalists, for instance. Like investigative journalists will be required to go to a certain extent to go and verify the information, have other sources, and examine closely all this. But still, the court is quite attentive to this, and so I just draw your attention on one decision that was given in June 2016. It's in a case called Suarez, where actually they refused to do whistleblower protection because the information was based on rumors, and they considered that it was not serious enough, and you cannot abuse of whistleblower protection as well, and because that will also cause a negative effect on serious whistleblowers, so to speak. The fourth question is the European Court of Human Rights also says, you should, to be fair, you also have to look at the damage that is done to the entity aimed in the case, and they look at it in a concrete way. Just again, a little step in the LuxLeaks case. PricewaterhouseCoopers asks for €1 of damages. And they have actually explained that they have increased their number of clients since the case came out, because people said, oh, really, we can do that in Luxembourg? Great. And there are a lot of saving on advertising fees, I imagine. And the fifth question is, so was the whistleblower acting in good faith? Good faith here is really understood as was the person acting out of personal animosity or not? If not, one has to consider that the whistleblower is acting in good faith. It seems quite easy to demonstrate when you see that usually whistleblowers, all their lives are shattered to pieces, and you say, who would want to sacrifice everything they have for public interest? But it still creates debates within the jurisdictions. And the sixth question is, they will also look at the severity of the sanction imposed on the whistleblower to see how deterrent it would be for the whistleblower. So how much courage it asked to the whistleblower to step out still knowing the retaliation that he will get back. Just a little, I conclude, just a little, two little remarks. The first remark is that in September 2016, some European MPs have launched a EULeaks platform, and they are using Tor, with the encrypted platform, which is funny because, well, the latest surveillance law in France has pointed out crypted system as a reason to suspect people of wrongdoing. So if you use a crypted message system, you are a suspect of doing something, you have something to hide, so you are a suspect. And the UMP said, we're using this because it has become a necessity now. There is no other way for whistleblowers and journalists to work together, and Jan explained this a bit earlier, without using crypted communications. This might seem quite easy to approach in Europe. If you do the same on the African continent, it's extremely complicated. It's already complicated actually in Europe. If you think of, I don't know, a whistleblower in Dakar, it's nearly impossible. It has to be face to face. It's very complicated. In parallel to this, in France, just 2 hours ago, we have a commission for the surveillance of communications and for the activities of the services surveilling communications, including encrypted communications. And the report just an hour ago said, well, between October 15 and October 16, officially, over 20,300 people in France have been surveilled without knowing it. This is numbers that we know, so you can imagine the part of the iceberg which is under the water. This is only for France, and it's absolutely not an exception. We're not the worst students, I think. You can imagine this is okay to fight against terrorism, etc., etc. But knowing this, you know that it is also an incentive for people to keep silent. It actually changes people's behavior, and it is a very strong deterrent for whistleblowers. I will finish on these words. Maybe for PricewaterhouseCoopers, the best advice for such corporates or politicians who hate whistleblowers. Well, the best way to fight whistleblowers is just not to give them a reason to blow the whistle and to just be transparent. So, thank you very much.